Ohio State suffers an inexcusable loss by the hands of Rutgers in Piscataway, New Jersey. Really poor late game execution, and another Ohio State basketball player gets hurt. All that and more right here on Locked On Buckeyes.
You are Locked On Buckeyes, your daily podcast on the Ohio State Buckeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, Buckeye fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Buckeyes, part of Locked On Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jay Stevens, also the host of the Jay Stevens Podcast. It is Thursday, February 10th in the year 2022, and I would like to thank every person out there for making Locked On Buckeyes their first to listen of every single day. We talked about it yesterday, and it was true the entire game. Playing Rutgers when Rutgers is at home at Jersey Mike's Arena is hard. It's tough. They're a really good basketball team when they're in New Jersey, and that was true the entire game. Ohio State loses. They move to 14-6 on the season, 7-4 in conference play at halftime. I believe it was Andy Katz who was talking about how Ohio State is still in the race, in the running to win the Big Ten regular season title. I don't see it. And it wasn't that I didn't see it in this game. I know how good this team is, but I didn't see it before this game. Ohio State still has issues. They are we're in February, and Ohio State is still trying to figure out their late game lineups. Their starting five has been consistent, but I still don't think this is the proper starting five for Ohio State. And they're doing things that you normally have figured out in December, early January. We're about to be in the middle of February, and Ohio State still doesn't have fundamental things figured out with this team. When you look at the box score, things will look and you'll see, well, this is a little interesting. Leading scorer for Ohio State, Malachi Branham, 7 of 13 shooting. Second in scoring for Ohio State, 16 points by E.J. Liddell, 6 of 13 shooting. And then Zed Key, 10 points, 4 of 12 shooting. Zed Key was good down low. Really did a good job with Cliff Omari. Finally figured out how to say that big man's name, thanks to Robbie Hummel there on the Big Ten Network. But that was interesting because I do know throughout this game, and even late in the game, the ball should have gone to Liddell more. There were plays and there were shots taken by Branham that really seemed a little odd, a little weird, and that's really how this game went. There were times that Rutgers got the lead, Ohio State got it back. There were times Ohio State got the lead, and then Rutgers got it back. It was a back and forth affair. Looking at Rutgers, though, and look at the box score, this is where things get, I think, a little bit interesting. We all know about Ron Harper Jr. He's out there stunting like his daddy, and we all know what he can do. Ohio State did a phenomenal job holding him to 1 of 8 shooting. That one shot he made was a 3. He had 6 points. But they got big contributions from 3 other players. Geo Baker, 25 points on 9 of 14 shooting. McCahey, 12 points on 4 of 8 shooting. And then Cliff Omari, who didn't miss a shot in the entire game. The only shot he missed was a free throw. He went 1 of 2 from the free throw line, 6 of 6 from the field with 13 points. Zedke added in 12 rebounds, but it wasn't enough. Ohio State late in the game, really bad execution. Early in the game, they came out strong. They were battling. They were fighting. Michi Johnson goes down with the ankle injury, but I still don't believe that ankle injury was why Ohio State lost this game. The biggest thing to me, we're going to dive deeper into what happened late in the game, which is really, really bad. Ohio State won. They ran with a different lineup in the second half, which was still interesting. They had Zed Key at the 5, Kyle Young at the 4, E.J. Liddell at the 3. I don't remember how many times Liddell normally plays the 3 while at Ohio State. Not saying it's a bad thing. I know personnel-wise, if you're going to have Kyle Young in the game and Zed Key, that really limits you with positioning. And I know Young can play outside, but it really limits you somewhat offensively, I think, having those 3 guys on the court together. But once again, we're having lineups in February that you normally have figured out by the end of December and January. Now, you may say, Jay, Ohio State had that layoff, and Ohio State had 5 games that weren't played when they were originally scheduled. I get that. I understand all of the hiccups that Ohio State has had this season. But in this game, it surely seemed like there were things that were fundamental things that we all might expect to happen that didn't. There were fundamental things we all might think, hey, Chris Holtmann, run this play, or hey, Chris Holtmann, run through this guy. Things didn't happen. The Michi Johnson injury wasn't the problem. Late in the game, Ohio State mentally seemed like they were not locked in. They were not 100% engaged in what was going on the court. And even in the beginning of the game, you're saying they're fighting, they're battling. I mean, I have a whole page of notes. In the first half, we're talking about how Jamari Wheeler had 2 fouls early, 2 fouls in the first 5 minutes, but Ohio State kept going. Geo Baker and Ron Harper Jr. made big shots. Justin Arns hit his first shot of the game. I'm like, okay, great. Hey, I know that they're battling. I know Wheeler, I know Harper Jr., Geo Baker, but Arns hitting that shot, that's a confidence booster. Second chance points were big. Nothing was easy. Battling on the rebounds. This was a game that I thought Ohio State could have kept all of that energy. A lot of the good things they did in the first half, I thought that was going to carry through to the second half. Late in the game, I have no idea what went down. I have no idea exactly what's going through the players' heads. Malachi Branham had an inexcusable chase down block. I'm thinking, hey, man, well, I know you're young, probably too young to know about this play, but it's very similar to, well, not exactly the same. Reggie Miller, Tayshaun Prince, 04 playoffs, when Tayshaun Prince had the chase down block of Reggie Miller. And the Pacers, who many believed were going to win the championship that year, got bounced out the playoffs by the Pistons. Well, Rutgers now might be in the tournament because they continue to win against quad one style opponents at home, or they keep getting quad one wins. Ohio State right now, just being honest with you, buddy, they're going to make the tournament. I don't know where they're going to play, but they're going to make the tournament. Will they get out of the first round, the first weekend? You know what I think? Probably not. And after they play today, your opinion might be the same as mine. Getting out that first weekend might not happen. It sucks. It's unfortunate, but this is the reality of this football team. They have things to work on. They have things to get better. And I don't know if this is a proper time for them to have to go through these growing pains at this portion of the season. It's Super Week, brought to you by Get Upside. And there's no better place to get coverage of the big game than a Locked On NFL podcast. Locked On Bengals and Locked On Rams are in LA all week covering the big game. Also, if you're on the YouTube, thank you so much. Phenomenal growth continues. I am going to bring a challenge to you, Ohio State Buckeye fans, that I believe we can get to. I'll give you what it is. I'll give you the time. And I think you guys can actually crush it because Buckeye fans do that. They show up, they show out, and they accomplish goals really, really quickly. Late in this game, the execution was poor. Absolutely poor. It was bad. I mean, I have no idea what Ohio State was doing when it came to how they were trying to execute down the stretch. So let's look at a few numbers to kind of help you better understand what happened late in this game and exactly what took place by not only Rutgers, but also what took place by Ohio State down the stretch. Rutgers ended the game on a 10-0 run over the final 3:07 left in that game. They hit their last 3 field goals. Ohio State, they finished the game missing their final 7 field goals. They finished the game hitting only 1 of their last 12 field goals, and they had a scoring drought of 3 over the final 3:48 in that game. Ohio State was up 8 with, I believe, 3:48. Yes, 3 over the last 3:48. Ohio State was up 8, and we see what happened. If you didn't see what happened, it was really, really confusing. I mentioned that chase down block that Malachi Branham had by McConnell late in the second half at the end of the game. Malachi Branham has the ball. He's driving. Instead of going up for a dunk, now I did remind people and talk about that Reggie Miller, Tayshaun Prince block in the 2004 NBA playoffs. I say Branham might not know about it because Branham, I don't believe, was even born at that time. 2012. Okay, he was born, but he was a youngster. I had to think about exactly when all these kids are born nowadays. He was born, but he did not know. He probably had no idea what was going on at that time. He was a baby, a toddler, probably couldn't even walk at that time. So Reggie Miller had the ball for the Pacers. He drives down, and instead of Reggie Miller dunking the ball, Reggie Miller's not a dunker, but he can't dunk, 6'7". Instead of dunking the ball, Tayshaun Prince basically acted like he was running a 40-yard dash and blocked the shot. Next thing you know, the Pistons go on to win that game, win the series, and win another NBA championship. So in this moment, I know there was a guy under the basket for Branham, but in my mind, I'm thinking, Branham, go up strong. You have dunked in traffic numerous times. Get this two in the scoring drought, and then go back on the other end and play defense. McConnell had a different plan. Branham did not go up strong as he should have. Branham ended up getting that layup blocked. McConnell, phenomenal block by him. Rutgers goes back to the other end, and Geo Baker gets a phenomenal, tough mid-range basket at the left elbow, and that was what kind of continued and followed and sparked this comeback by Rutgers. The next time down the court, and we're not taking 2 minutes off. The next time down the court, Ohio State had another inexcusable play with a really bad mental flop, and numerous players lost track of how much time was left on the shot clock. I know Liddell had the ball at the three-point line. Branham had a little bit. Nobody really figured out what was going on, and late-game execution, late-game awareness was really, really bad. Think about how people used to get on Andy Reid all of the time, NFL-wise, for his late-game execution and clock management late in games. Not just with the Chiefs, but it also happened when he was with the Eagles. People really got on his head for really poor clock management. Is this on Chris Holtmann? I'm not putting this on Chris Holtmann. I think there are things to talk about when it comes to Chris Holtmann. Chris Holtmann is a phenomenal basketball coach. We can go back to before the season, talk about how there were things that maybe that were out of his control that are hindering the team right now. Maybe there were some things that were in his control that are hindering the things right now that just did not happen. Geo Baker gets that shot, and then the Buckeyes come back down to the other end of the court. They end up getting a shot clock violation, and I'm sitting here scratching my head wondering what is going on. Rutgers goes back down, ties the game at 64. And then they come back down to score again. That's where the 10-0 run comes in. And then I think it was like the second to last play for Ohio State. Instead of running a play for E.J. Liddell, they run a play for Malachi Branham. I'm not saying Branham's a scrub. He's a really good basketball player. I think it was Rayfield Davis or Robbie Hummel was talking about how Malachi Branham could win Big Ten Freshman Player of the Year. That's the conversation that's going to be had by numerous people. We're not going to knock and talk about how Branham's not a really good basketball player. He is a phenomenal basketball player. But in that moment, it may have been due to the lineup that they had on the court, because you have Key, Young, and Liddell. You're going to put Ron Harper Jr., who's going to guard Liddell, a bigger body. I think he's like 6'5", 6'6". He's like 240. Bigger body, bigger frame. He can move. He's quick. He is a guy that could guard Liddell and move with Liddell. And so in that moment, maybe it was a matchup thing where you run it for Branham. But Branham kept going to the court, going to the basket. And in my mind, I'm thinking, young man, get rid of the ball. This is not your time. I get it. If you make the shot, great. But with the way things have gone for Ohio State down the final stretch of the game, I did not believe that was the proper move for Branham at the time. I thought you still should have got the ball in Liddell's hand, ran the ball through Liddell, let EJ do what he can. Things were not easy for EJ Liddell tonight. This is coming shortly after the game concluded, but things were not easy for EJ Liddell. But I still think you have to run that play for him and run through him. You have to. Defensively, yes, Rutgers was sticky. Rutgers changed things up and really muddied up and confused Ohio State as far as what the defense was doing for Rutgers. But I still think late in that game, you need to run that play for EJ Liddell. You have to. If you're trying, it doesn't work out, have enough time left on the clock to be able to run another play, get the ball to somebody else so that you can still get a high percentage shot. Late in the game, there was 15.4 seconds left, and when that happened, the ball goes out of bounds. When Brandon misses the shot, there's, I think, 3.2 seconds left in the game. You bring in Justin Arns. I forget who exited the game at this time, but you bring in a guy who's been on the bench for quite a long time. He is your shooter. You're in the corner of the you're in the corner on the baseline. You can't move. So you're really landlocked as far as, hey, Rutgers is going to do a phenomenal job of guarding the inbounds pass. Ohio State is going to struggle, just based off personnel, is going to struggle as far as who is going to get the ball, who is going to how they're going to get the ball, how much time they can move when getting the ball. And what do we have here? Justin Arns goes up for the shot. It is blocked. Now, some may say he was fouled, but in that moment, that is one of those calls that you just don't make due to the time of the game, where you're at in the game. It has to be a really blatant foul for the foul to be called. Ohio State has an inexcusable loss, really poor late game execution, and you, myself, the players, the coaches, everybody that watches or follows Ohio State or maybe had a glance of this game is going to look at this game and say, Ohio State has too much talent to be where they are right now. Ohio State has too much talent to be 14-6, to be 7-4 in the conference. They have way too much talent for that. What's the problem? Mentally, they were not engaged late. Mentally, they made too many errors. And it also goes to some fundamental things. Injuries hurt this team. I don't know how Meechie Johnson would have assisted or aided this team, but I firmly think, I've said it here once, I'll say it again, Cedric Russell needs to play more. He absolutely needs to play more. Do I think he would have made a big difference late in the game? I think he would have probably made a somewhat of a difference. Almost, I don't know how huge it would have been. He would have made it somewhat of a difference because that's a scoring threat that Ohio State needed late in the game. Defensively, it would have, offensively, it would have opened things up for EJ Liddell. But that's where the cookie crumbles. Late game execution was poor, and Ohio State has another loss this season. If you are somebody that would love to advertise and advertise your business, maybe you're local in Columbus or some portion in Ohio, you would love to advertise your business here on the podcast, send me an email, jstevens317@gmail.com. I'd love to talk to you, hear about what you're doing, and then see about having your business advertised here on the Locked On Buckeyes podcast. Also, if you're an Apple Podcast listener, please head to Apple Podcast. Make sure you're following, not just on the Apple Podcast app, but any podcast listening app of your choosing. And make sure you leave a 5-star review and a rating. It's a great way, free way, to allow more people to enjoy the Locked On Buckeyes podcast that you enjoy 5 days a week. The injury bug cannot leave Ohio State. I don't know what the deal is, but it seems like every time we look up, just a day ago, we talked about how Seth Towns is going to be out for the remainder of the season. And today, we're talking about how Meechie Johnson rolled his ankle on Zedke's foot in the second half. Meechie Johnson ended up going to the locker room in the second half shortly after he messed up his ankle, coming back to the bench throughout the late portion of the game, but did not return to the game. Now, with it being a rolled ankle, when he left the game, he did not put any pressure on his foot, on that leg, which is not a good sign. However, with it being an ankle, I think we have all that have played sports at some point in time rolled our ankle or rolled both ankles. I got a bad ankle right. Yesterday I talked about my back. Today I'm talking about my ankle. You guys may think Jay has the body of an 85-year-old man. Absolutely not. But I have rolled ankles, both of my ankles, and I'm still living with the effects of that to this day. A rolled ankle is not fun. They're not, but everybody has them. Some people's rolled ankles, they're not as bad as others. Sometimes you may think the slightest rolled ankle may have you out for a week. We just don't know. But this is one thing that I don't think Ohio State can have right now. Jimmy Soto's off the bench and does not get many minutes. Meechie Johnson has been starting. I think he started his 6th game in a row, 6th or 7th game in a row. He has started quite a few games here lately. And then if you do this, we're talking about how Ohio State is still trying to figure things out due to injuries, due to cancellations and postponements. One of those postponements has been rescheduled. I think the first day in March will be the Nebraska game that was canceled at the end of January. There's so many different details, so many different things going on with this team. And now another injury is not what was planned for Ohio State at this portion of the season, or really throughout any portion of the season. How does Ohio State overcome a Meechie Johnson injury. Let's just say that Meechie Johnson is out for 2 weeks or a week and a half, or just has to miss the Michigan game. Let's just say he has to miss one game. I think there are two guys that Chris Holtmann will consider putting in the starting lineup based on Meechie Johnson's absence if he has to miss the game against the team up north on Saturday night. Number one, Justin Arns. I do think Justin Arns is still a player, a somebody. Yes, he's a somebody. I still think Justin Arns is a player that Chris Holtmann wants to rely on. He's a team captain, and I do believe Justin Arns kind of has deserved and he's earned the right to potentially play in Meechie Johnson's absence in the starting lineup. The other person, I talk about him all the time, and I do think sometimes abnormal situations may assist and aid the alterations to a starting lineup or to a lineup that may be what benefits you late in the season. We talked about it last year. CJ Walker goes down. When he comes back, he goes to the second unit. And that was really what catapulted Ohio State down the latter portion of the season. I think right now you have to consider putting Cedric Russell in the starting lineup. Think about this. Jamari Wheeler is the orchestrator or the conductor. If you have Arns in there in the starting lineup, we know he's very limited. We know he's only a three-point shooter. Just yesterday, he had a running floater in the lane, and I was like, what is this? We don't see you ever get this confident ever when you're playing the basketball as far as taking this route to score the basketball. But honestly, I kind of like it. I kind of like him doing things that are different. I kind of like him doing things that'll be a little different for him. I kind of like those things. And so if you put Cedric Russell or Justin Arns in the starting lineup with Jamari Wheeler, Wheeler's not going to be a scorer, but he can score. He could get you about 6 to 8 points, and I do think that there'll be well-timed points, either three-pointer, drive to the paint, mid-range. Everything he does is well-timed, calculated, and it's really a difference maker when he's on the court. So you can put Arns in there, but I think if you put Cedric Russell in there, that's going to allow for more open shots, easier lanes for Malachi Branham to drive in. And then for EJ Liddell, knowing he's a 3-level type of scorer in the paint, mid-range, and three-point land, that's going to open up things for him. And then for Zed Key, that's going to do the same thing for him. So I do honestly think, and of course, I've been a big proponent of this for quite a long time. I don't think I've said it enough here on the podcast. Putting Cedric Russell in the starting lineup if Meechie Johnson has to miss any time on the court, I think would be wise. I think it would be something that people might question and say, why do you make this move? I say because it's a thing you need right now. It would be a change. It would be a great move. You could put Meechie Johnson back in the second unit, which I do think at times needs a spark. Perfect. You get that done. Yes, you will have scorers on the bench, and I think you even will put in Jimmy Sotos a little bit more. But Cedric Russell in the starting lineup, just like CJ Walker going down last year, going to the bench. I think if Ohio State wants to get out of the first weekend of the tournament, which I do think is their plan, this might be the shakeup and the move that they need to make right now. Guys, it's been a fun week. This is Thursday. We'll be back. We will be back tomorrow. The plan for tomorrow's show is to talk football. We're currently I'm thinking about NFL Combine stuff. Got throwing Master Teague in there as well. That's the plan for tomorrow. You want to come back for it, but that's not set in stone. The news that comes out of Ohio State is always what dictates the space of this here podcast. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at jstevens07. And I want to thank you for making the Locked on Buckeyes podcast your first listen of every single day. Make sure you make the second listen of every single day the Locked on Bets podcast, your daily one-stop shop for all your gambling needs. The Locked on Bets podcast, which is hosted by your boy Q, with expert analysis and insights from Lee Sterling. It's free and available wherever you get your fine podcast. This has been the Thursday edition of the Locked on Buckeyes podcast. I am your host, Jay Stevens. We're out for the day. Let's enjoy the rest of the week and get ready for the big game against those pesky Wolverines in Ann Arbor on Saturday night.